Fantastic. All right. I want to thank Brian. The last presentation, the keyword that I heard today that I did not learn, I had not heard before, jackpot fatigue. So I don't know about y'all. I've never had jackpot fatigue, but I would like to. All right. Let's see here. Momentary adjustment. There we go. Okay. Now we're all set. All right, so again, Andy Meadows from Austin, Texas. I'm with BL.INK. This QR code will pop up a few times today. If you see it, feel free to scan it. It'll have access to the slides, a link to a webinar that we did recently with ObservePoint, and also some additional information if you wanted to connect and chat some more. So let's dig in a bit. Let's see. Sorry. There we go. All right, so today we're going to be talking about puzzles, the puzzles of marketing attribution, and helping to piece together the fragmented ecosystem. So as we all know, it's a very complicated world out there. Our digital systems, they're all disparate, yet they all need to talk together seamlessly. And that's a big challenge for everyone, everywhere around the world. A little bit about BL.INK. So BL.INK, our customers, we get the privilege of working with the greatest brands in the world to help tell their stories, to connect them with their consumers. Our customers spend millions of dollars creating the audiences and the experiences, and we believe that the link is the most important connection as the destination, because when you look at it, if that link is broken, as we've all experienced multiple times, you've lost the opportunity to connect with your consumer. So although the link is often forgotten about until the last minute, we believe that it is as critical as the destination itself. And making sure you can tell that story correctly and effectively is critical to that entire customer journey. So let's talk about puzzles. Again, the puzzle world, we all have the experiences around them. We've all put together puzzles. Some of them are easy, some of them are hard, some of them are seemingly impossible. But I want to start with a bit of a story. About 10 or 15 years ago, I happened to mention to my mom, who's 73 now, that I read an article that said that if you do a puzzle, it helps with dementia and Alzheimer's and keeping you sharp. And I didn't think twice about it. And the years go by, my mom retired, and suddenly she started buying puzzles. And so now if you go to her house, there's a pretty good chance you're going to find a puzzle in her kitchen that she's working on. She's done thousands of them at this point. But what I realized in that process is that there's a strategy and a process to this. So when you think about the puzzles that we put together every day in our lives, there's a process that we've all followed. We've all put together puzzles before. We all take the pieces, we dump them out on the table. So there's everything, all the ingredients we have to work with. The very first thing we do is we flip them all over so we can all see them equally, and see what the colors are and the patterns, and start looking at the ecosystem around us. And then we all start looking for the magical corner pieces, the pieces that are the borders that hinge everything together that we use to map what's going to go on inside that experience. And then we start piecing together the edges around the outside. And once we have the borders put together, then we start filling in, we start looking for the same colors and the same patterns until that story starts to emerge and we can start making momentum around it. And all this is done while we have the picture of the finished puzzle in front of us, because nobody puts together a puzzle without a picture of what that finished process looks like. And so as you start thinking about your ecosystem, that digital stack that you're working with, it's just like that puzzle. We have those corner pieces, we look for the borders, we have the components that we're working on, we flip things over so we can see things like for like, and we start with the picture in mind of what we want it to look like at the end. So it's important for us to keep that puzzle in mind as we're putting all these pieces together. When you look at the marketing ecosystem today, it's very fragmented. There are different systems doing different things for different people for different reasons. We've got different departments, different brands, all working independently, yet all need to be synonymous together. So when you dig into the details of each one of these, every system generates its own details, its own analytics, its own metrics. All the data that it generates, it's meant to work seamlessly within that silo, but we need to all speak together, all with one another, talking to each other as if they were built by the same teams in the same places. So stitching together all these different pieces is a challenge today. You would never think about grabbing a handful of puzzle pieces from one puzzle and putting them into another because it just doesn't work that way. But in the grand scheme of things, if you can take different puzzles and piece them together side by side to make a much bigger picture, that tells a beautiful story. So if we were to take all these pieces together and map them together into one big, beautiful picture, that's what we're all ultimately trying to build. So let's talk about marketing attribution. So multi-touch is the way everybody wants to operate. And the way I like to describe attribution in general and multi-touch is using taco trucks, because I'm from Austin and everything's about tacos. And everybody can relate to tacos because it's the greatest food in the world. Much like attribution, when you think about it, if I'm walking by and I'm ready to buy a taco from a taco truck, and I saw an ad on Instagram, and I happened to click on that, and I watched a little video, and I engaged with it a bit, that would be that first touch. But it doesn't necessarily want me to get in the car and drive to that taco stand immediately and go buy my taco. But if I'm walking by that taco stand and I see that ad that says, scan this QR code and get a coupon off your first order, that's going to likely want me to make a detour into that taco stand. And so when you look at the different ways that the attribution flows to get me to engage with that and make a purchase, that's the different multi-touch components. And so as you extrapolate that into a much more complicated ecosystem, it all boils down to the little steps that you take in that journey that allow people to engage with your brand over time and build that relationship, that first touch, that first party data that you can engage with and begin build that relationship with them over time until they become customers and ultimately fans and influencers for your own brand. So thanks to our fantastic stock imagery, I'm sure we can all relate to somebody here. Whether you be the person on the right or the left or in the middle, at the end of the day, when you look at the data that you have, it is often disjointed. That story that you're trying to tell is complicated. Again, having that one system talk to the other. But you've got different teams that, again, they each care about something somewhat different and somewhat unique, yet they all flow together. So the compliance and privacy folks, they care about the security and the privacy, making sure that they're compliant and the governance around it. But then you have the marketers who are trying to get more people in the door, but do that safely. But they're sometimes not as concerned about the governance around it or what cookies are being set or how they're being tracked. But when you look at the overall big picture, at the end of the day, it's about top and bottom line impact, of which everybody cares about. So when these things are all woven together, the story that we're trying to tell is the same, yet we're telling it from different perspectives. But what's important is to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, doing it the same way, with the same cohesive story each and every time. And one of the things when you dig into this, when you look at the impact that having the right attribution strategy and the tools and the process to map it all together, it has a big impact. There's a study done by I think it was HubSpot. 40% of marketers struggle to prove the ROI. And if you can't prove the ROI, you can't get the budget. You can't grow. It's hard to justify what you're doing and how you're doing it. But so often, the data to tell that story is challenging. So you're looking at when you're feeding that data into those systems, a lot of times you don't get that information fast enough. I had a customer one time that had evolved to the point where they were getting the data for last month, mid-month, and the current month to make decisions for the next month. So every decision they were making was suddenly 60 days behind when it actually happened. And that's not the way to run a multi-billion-dollar business. But it's the way everybody's doing it, so many people are doing it each and every day around the world. So we'll talk a little bit about the tool to manage the attribution strategies and the solutions around it. So one of the first things is that most organizations are doing this with a spreadsheet today. And if you are, it's okay, there's no judgment here, you're in a safe space. But spreadsheets are really driving a lot of this in the beginning as people are starting to understand how to get off the spreadsheets into something that's more cohesive. But ultimately what it's about is making sure that every component you're doing, every campaign is being done the same way across every touch point. We want to make sure that no matter what the campaign is, no matter what the brand is, it's unique, but it's all aligned. It needs to make sure that each and every touch point tells the same story to the same people so that they're managing it all together, ultimately able to compare one against the other. And we want to make sure that everything is normalized so that we're feeding your analytics platform, be it Adobe, Google, or something else, that we're telling that same story, we're feeding them the right data. So one of the things that BL.INK does is it allows us to feed the analytics platforms with the same details for every touch point, whether that's social, offline, online, et cetera. So ultimately, they're able to see all the big pictures, information, make the right decisions, the right details, and ultimately tell the right story, make the right decisions to justify the budgets to grow and expand each and every component of that. We find that the organizations that adopt this strategy are seeing a 20% more effective return on those budgets. That's a general baseline, but without a doubt, being able to tell that story faster, easier, more consistently, leads to better decision making and better justification of those budgets. So here's a few quick examples of some of the ways that BL.INK tailors these touch points, these engagements to their audience. So one of the components here, we'll look at the link variant, so being able to quickly and easily create a unique link variant, whether that be for paid, digital, online, offline, whatever that touch point may be, that we're able to tell that right story effectively by creating those variations quickly in the platform. Also being able to justify and validate the experience based on geography or language. So one of our customers, Nestle, will put a QR code on a cereal box and ship that same QR code, same cereal box, to 16 different countries. But when they scan that, it says, oh, you're in this country and you speak this language, so we're going to take you to this experience. So they're able to do this months in advance, put it out there, and adjust it in real time based on that experience for the consumer. So it makes it much easier to roll that information out and create that perfect one-to-one experience. Again, that link is as critical as that destination. So being able to generate these at scale, to manage them, to create that buffer between the audience and the destination, to manage that, to be able to make changes based on real-time experience, really flows and allows them to be more expedient in how they get campaigns to market and how they make those changes. So let's talk a bit about the right attribution model. So there's probably 8 or 10 or more different attribution models depending on who you talk to. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about that multi-touch point. It's about being confident that you are creating the right links that tell the right story, to collect the right data for the right time into the right systems. Without all these decisions being made together effectively, you're not able to tell that right story. So only 17% of marketers feel confident that they're able to do this effectively and confidently over time, that these attribution models are telling the right story. And getting everybody on board at the same time is really difficult, especially when your organization could be spread all over the globe with people that you may not talk to, if sometimes not ever, but if anything, maybe weekly or monthly at best. So let's talk about a few of our different customers. One of the first ones is Coca-Cola. So as you pick up a Coca-Cola can, you'll notice that on every can there's a QR code. That QR code flows through our system. Coca-Cola uses us through text messaging, on vending machines, ultimately looking at every touch point they have. Every one of those links flows through the BL.INK platform. But what's great for Coca-Cola is that they're able to manage all that behind the scenes. They can change those on a whim based on feedback, based on real-time information, based on the data that they collect and manage. And getting everybody globally on the same page, using the same tool, telling the same story the same way, is really unify them to be able to elevate their connected packaging strategy, to get every component together and ultimately map things side by side and make the right decisions. When you dig in and look at some of the information that they're putting out recently, it's talking about the value of their packaging. The most valuable real estate in the world is their packaging. It's in everyone's homes, it's in every shelf, it's in every experience. There's 1 billion packages consumed a day, 1 billion servings. So when you look at that, every one of those is now connected, and they flow through the BL.INK platform to make sure that everyone is getting the right data to make the right decisions. So whether you're Coca-Cola or Sprite or Fanta, they're doing things the same way, telling the same story, and able to measure things side by side, whether you're a marketer in North America, marketer in Europe, marketer in Asia, et cetera. So getting every one of these marketers together, hundreds of them around the world, telling the same story, using the BL.INK templates to be able to create links consistently and confidently throughout each campaign, keeps everybody on the same page at the same time with all the right attribution components to tell those same stories. Another example in a more compliant side of things is Bank of America. So you can imagine in the banking world, compliance is paramount. When we talk to our banking and finance customers, that's often the lead when they're reaching out to us is we care about compliance first, then we'll get into capabilities, then we'll get into budget. So first and foremost is around compliance. And so with Bank of America, when you start looking at QR codes on ATM machines or their direct mail campaigns or any of the components around their text messaging and so forth, having a system that allows them to maintain that compliance with their first-party data programs, as well as all the components around their different systems that they have to speak to internally, and each one of the regulations around that being compliant with state and federal privacy guidelines, all that feeds in together through the BL.INK platform. So again, everyone's consistently creating the same kind of links the same way, and a single change inside of the BL.INK platform can have rippling effects across their entire ecosystem. So it allows us to keep them not only compliant, but consistent across every touch point, every vendor, every tool. So every touch point on the consumer side all engages the same way. So also Room and Board. We talked about Room and Board last year. And Room and Board continues to evolve and grow with our platform. One of the things that they've been able to do is look at their ecosystem around the different touch points and the stores themselves, both online and offline. So you think about somebody who gets a catalog and sees a QR code and scans it and then goes into a store, being able to connect the dots between those two journeys. Or somebody who might go from one store and shop and ultimately purchase in another store. So being able to connect those dots and those journeys together and realize that from an attribution standpoint, they need to know that the purchase decision didn't start and finish in a single location, but it's throughout that entire journey, sometimes multiple physical touches in multiple locations across disparate parts of the country. But ultimately, it tells the same story, leading that same journey. So being able to see all that together allows them to justify some of the expenses and some of the data flow between their online and offline experiences. So they're able to see that same journey and see that the purchase decision happens sometimes early on in the process, but they're ultimately, it makes that, it'll make the decision down the road when they're in that store and able to do that in whatever environment, whatever store that is most convenient to them. But the purchase doesn't always necessarily happen right in that moment. That decision is made over the course of several touches. And BL.INK allows them to see those different attribution points, feed all that data together consistently so that story is seamlessly told from point to point. So we dig into the overall attribution strategy and really bringing it all together. A few of the components around this get into the attribution strategies of looking at your entire ecosystem, looking at what matters most to different points inside your organization, whether that be on the privacy and compliance side, on the finance side, sometimes the tools and decisions that are made. But ultimately, it's about that consumer journey and that experience and being able to stitch together and weave that process seamlessly and consistently across, again, each of those touch points. So within BL.INK, being able to create those different templates for different departments, different functions that ultimately feed that same story together, you're able to tailor that experience for each department, each brand, but at the end of the day, the analytics team gets what they need in order to make the right decisions, to tell the right story, and ultimately feed that data together in one cohesive picture for the entire organization. That allows senior executives to make the right decisions, to see the big picture, and plan better for the future, and give credit towards the efforts that are actually making a big difference in the organization. So within that, you're able to look at the ROI returns on each of those tools, judge them for the value that they bring. So it's not just about one tool getting all the credit for the whole story, but seeing how each one of those tools works together to tell that story. And ultimately make those right decisions to justify the expense for each of those tools, to know where to invest and where to pull back, where to cut, where to grow, and what gaps there are in that entire system. So we want to make sure that ultimately we're able to justify the entire ecosystem, to validate that and provide the background and the foundation that we need to build upon it and grow each and every bit over time. So again, going back to those four corners we talked about in the beginning. So when that puzzle ecosystem, those four corners from our perspective tend to be around the governance and security. So again, that the different rules and regulations that are out there around each component that we have, making sure that we're, again, consistent as each of these new rules and regulations evolve, being able to segment based on geography, knowing which state you're in, which country you're in, and we're compliant based on each of those components. Again, the attribution consistent we've talked about throughout, making sure that every touch point is managed and measured the same way so you can compare and contrast them equally. The analytic insights. So one of the biggest things that we hear is the analytics team doesn't get the right data. They're missing, there's gaps. The story isn't being told in a complete and cohesive way. So they're really ultimately, there's a missing component that doesn't allow them to validate whether or not as a campaign is truly successful. So being able to feed your analytics team with the right data consistently through each of those touch points is one of those corner pieces for us. And lastly, that management and control. I'm sure we've all seen a newsletter that goes out, and then you see the correction that goes out later. Oh, we sent the wrong link. Here's the right link. So within BL.INK, able to go in and change that in 30 seconds. You can fix that. There's no resends. There's no apologies needed because the mistake is changed in a few seconds. So little things like that around the management control, creating that buffer between the consumer and that destination so you can easily adjust that, or realizing that, oh, we have a large audience that speaks a different language, I want to put in a different destination based on that. Or if they're on a certain device, where I might want to route them different places based on the device they're on, desktop versus mobile. Really tailoring that experience based on that ecosystem, based on the data that we have in front of us. So that management control gives us that consolidation so that we can feel that we have that safety net that really helps us in a pinch make those big changes quickly and easily. But in just a few seconds to completely change how that evolves and flows. And at the end of the day, it's really around the governance and compliance to have one single platform that the entire organization is using. So everybody's following the same rules, the same guidelines. We don't end up with ghost accounts where somebody creates a QR code, puts it on a campaign, and then somebody needs to change it and nobody knows who owns it. Or it's not following the governance and compliance guidelines because they're in a certain country and the rules changed, and now they need to make a change and nobody knows how to make a change to that code, or it's fixed, it wasn't in the corporate guidelines. So really that governance, compliance, control component is one of those pillars that we really dig into to make sure that the organization has the tool platform in place so that they have those right corner pieces in place as they begin to build out that strategy. So the next steps in the unified attribution strategy. So whether it's BL.INK or hopefully not a spreadsheet, but if you're on a spreadsheet, that's a good place to start. Ultimately, it's about having a tool that standardizes and gets everyone on the same page the same way. It's critical to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, using the same terminology. When there's an update, we're not worried about a formula breaking and suddenly something changes, or checking it out, checking it back in. It needs to be a place where we can work together at the same time, the same way, and tell the same story each and every time. It's about finding the attribute model or models that work best for your organization based on the types of campaigns you're running, making sure that it's flowing through seamlessly, that you're looking at the effectiveness of it, the success of that campaign, how that matches from one to the other, and that you're able to empower the organization to operate individually, that they can work in that self-service environment. They're not having to go through tickets to make changes or updates, that they can go in and make the changes they need to empower each and every marketer to do what they need to, but at the same time doing it in a way where the governance and compliance side feels comfortable with what they're doing. And so the steps that we have around that is critical. And at the same time also, we want to make sure that when they're implementing this, that, again, that oversight piece, that ultimately it's rolling up based on what the organization itself needs to see, that we're able to look at this in the big picture and compare all the campaigns equally, that privacy is paramount in everything that we do. The relationships that we're creating today are more important than ever, as it's becoming less and less possible for us to create those third-party data relationships. The first-party data relationship now has exponential value. So this one-to-one relationship that we have to create each and every link, every scan, every click, every tap, to create that first-party data relationship and build that permission model between us and the brand as the consumer side, we want to make sure that we're able to build that relationship, and we do that by creating that personalized experience. And we personalize it by making sure that the attributes in those links and codes are all unique to that individual. And they're able to tell that right story. And that hyper-relevance is really what allows me as a consumer to engage with that brand, to understand that I'm being marketed to directly, that this is about a conversation one-to-one with me. And creating that personalized experience is what elevates one brand above another to create that relationship and ultimately that permission model for that first-party data, which is what we're all secretly looking for in that process. So it becomes more and more important for us as we step through this and to keep each and every touch point personalized to every individual. That's what everybody's ultimately looking for, so having the right tools in place to be able to do that quickly and effectively is really critical to that entire journey. So with that, I'll pause here. Questions, happy to answer them. And again, if you any interest in the QR code, you can scan it, go to the presentation, or I'm sure it'll be provided as well. But happy to entertain any questions, and if not, then thank you much.